in the inflation risk, the stagflation risk, the other thing that you have really been hitting on recently, and I'm wondering how much you have revised this assessment, if at all, this week with some of the reduction in the tariffs, is the risk of a financial crisis. And one, if you could just explain why that's something we should be worried about at all, and what the warning signs are, and what's your current thinking on that right now?
Okay. Um, for the moment, there were some early indicators that looked like financial crisis. And the style of financial crisis, if we're going to have one, um, the most sort of familiar thing is that you get a situation where there are key players in the sort of the plumbing of the financial markets that are not set up to audio skipping again, some people are saying. Sorry, I don't know, we'll do what we can. But there are people. One thing I've learned, I've done a couple of videos with Nathan Tankus, who's one of those, you know, sort of self-taught
Yeah.
stuff that hey, we didn't study in grad school. And the just the financial. There's one thing we've learned actually, just in general, in the last 5 years, is how much of the economy depends um, on really kind of pesky, like I said, plumbing. That that we just think, oh, there's GDP, and we spend it, and it goes to imports, and actually, it has to go through container ports and railroads and trucks and stuff. All of that is much more vulnerable. And hang on a moment. Yeah. Uh, my wife, who's listening, is wondering what happened. I could tell her uh, that
Tell her
we
we
are.
appreciate her concern. That's very sweet of her.
Uh, um, but yeah, we're. Let's see if I can make this work. Sorry, you're getting a good view of my light fixture or something. But the and hope that this is functional. There we go. Um, the um, and financial markets are like that too. If you say, oh, um, uh, the government sells some bonds, or companies make a financial exchange. Well, actually, there's a lot of intermediaries and so on, and it turns out that these intermediaries, they need to be solvent. They need capital to operate. A lot of the current financial system actually depends a lot on hedge funds, and that they're the primary brokers, dealers for a lot of stuff, and a lot of hedge funds are caught by these wild changes in valuations when policy is this unstable. So you have a bunch of hedge funds that can't really do their job, and there were some clear signs that some of the um, things that are not traded um, in really large volumes, so they really depend upon the brokers to keep the market working, were suddenly starting to not be traded or sell at big discounts. And that was a kind of a at least a cousin of the financial crisis we had back in 2008. Now that seems to have abated some. Still, things are still looking a little elevated, but that's one thing. The other thing is that the stock market's been doing uh, occasionally seeming optimistic, but if you look at the value of the dollar against other currencies, that's been consistently pessimistic, and which is weird because normally tariffs cause the dollar to get stronger because you're spending less on imports, less demand for foreign currencies. Uh, and what that looks like is now, as we were talking earlier about how America runs a trade deficit essentially because people think we're a good place to invest. Well, maybe they don't anymore. and there's at least yeah, I cut my teeth as a policy economist largely on crises in emerging markets. And I actually just spoke to some in New York, but I spoke to a Brazilian audience just the other day, and I said, you know, I love your country, I love you, but I'm also grateful that these days to see crisis, uh, I don't have to fly to Sao Paulo. I can just take the one train, and the uh, the U.S. is showing now we're a long, long way. You know, my sort of base case for what does a real capital flight from a country that is no longer regarded as credible look like, and that's uh, that's Indonesia in 1998 with the rupiah losing 80% of its value, and we're talking about a few percent on the dollar, but still not the kind of thing. You know, America is supposed to be. We are the reliable country. U.S. Treasury bills are the ultimate safe asset, safer than anything, or were. Now, so you see signs that all of this takes a toll on U.S. credibility, and in general, credibility is it's always invoked to defend bad or orthodox policies, but that just never matters. And if a world in which nobody is sure what the hell the United States is going to do next is not a good world for anybody.
What's your, you alluded to this a second ago, the stock market recovery, what's your analysis of that? That has been cited by, lots of people as, oh, these tariffs haven't had any negative impact. The stock market freak out is over, so everything's just fine and dandy.
Yeah, stock market is not the economy. That's one that where we're always told. The stock market, even if the stock
Yeah,
market rational, it's reflecting corporate profits, and corporate profits is not just a piece of the economy, necessarily the one most of us care about, but also it's not rational. We know that, and it's certainly a poor predictor. Paul Samuelson, great economist, my teacher and former colleague, famously said that the stock market had predicted 9 of the last 5 recessions. The stock market is the guide to what's going to happen, and particularly the stock market, sort of small retail investors who are very vibes based. And it's hard to know, but it does look as if the smart money is being a lot less sanguine than that. But I like to look at other markets. The if you look at bonds, it's a little bit complicated, but the bond market is definitely not looking like it thinks that the crisis is over. The bond market is really looking nervous. I've been looking lately at oil futures.
why is that?
One thing that's good about oil futures is that's professional investors. People, sports bars with CNN on in the background are not speculating in oil futures, and oil futures are way down, because which is a signal that people in that market think that the world economy is still in trouble. So I think the stock market is not a good indicator, and I actually think it may turn out to be a self-defeating prophecy. It is that Trump will feel vindicated by the fact that the stock market is up, and so he'll continue to do crazy stuff.
Right, right. But oh, it's not so bad, right? Because that is an indicator he cares about.
Yeah,
Th-
and
there's- yeah, go ahead.
I actually drives me a little bit crazy that people over focus on the stock market, which we know is a really poor indicator of what's going
Yeah. Well, there's been this effort to, this gets a little weedy, so I hope you can break this down for us in a way that is easy to understand. But there's been this effort to put a sort of higher level intellectual sheen on Trump's tariff policies. And if I've got this right, the argument is that he's deliberately trying to weaken the dollar in a way that would somehow benefit the United States. So I wonder if you could just explain that actual philosophy behind that, whether there's any indication that that's really what they care about, and if it is, whether it would make sense anyway.
on. Okay, so first of all, Um, I actually just did, and it'll be popping up on my Substack tomorrow. I did a long conversation with Joey Politano. Who's this very very good, alarmingly young but very good uh, person who's really following the ins and outs. And one of the things that Joey likes to say is that there has been, where are the white papers? Where are the strategy documents explaining from the administration explaining their policy? And
Yeah.
there not one. There hasn't been a
Zero.
statement of what they're trying to accomplish. And there's no reason to think that there is a strategy behind there. The Trump selected as chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, a guy named Steve Miran, who he had a white paper that kind of laid out a strategy for weakening the dollar and stuff. But there is absolutely, and people, poured over it saying, "Oh, is this the administration's strategy?" But it isn't. It was something he wrote sort of on his own, and then got hired. And it was clear that he was hired because they thought that in some ways what he said could be construed as support uh, what they're doing, although it really isn't. And it's not a it, there's that position, chair of the council, is I worked there once. But it's even in the best of times, it's not an important policy making position. At best, it's he has the president's ear, which almost certainly he doesn't. And he was not hired to devise policy. He was hired to provide um, a plausible front or of some intellectual gloss on the policy. It's like, it's the uh, a drunk uses a lamppost for support, not for illumination. And there is no strategy there. Um, Now, do you want a weaker dollar? There have been times when we did. Once upon a time, there was um, uh, you talk about 1985 and the Plaza Accord, or actually, Richard Nixon wanted the dollar weak and actually temporary 10% tariff on everybody to force them to strengthen their currencies against the dollar. But the idea that that's a desirable thing right now, uh, again, what problem are we supposed to be solving? We have an economy that, at least until the next jobs report, is still at full employment. We're worried about inflation. A weaker dollar would add to inflation. There's really no kind of strategy there, to the extent that, I mean, Trump is making the dollar weaker, but kind of making the dollar weaker by making America look irresponsible and untrustworthy, which is not exactly everybody's idea of a great economic strategy. So
And
it's really hard to know. I don't. I Is there anything? I hate to personalize this, but if you think that there's a clever strategy, who is responsible for that? I mean, who's Howard
and
Lutton?
Trump himself has said he doesn't want to weaken the dollar. So it's just this like constant search for. It's like everyone's always searching for a foreign policy doctrine that ties everything together. And a lot of the times, this is just journalists, trying to find new clever reasoning and retrofitting this stuff on like a lot of nonsense and insanity.
I mean, I did, as I said, spend a year in the U.S. government during the Reagan administration, of all things, sub-political level. But I wasn't in there. I was in the room for cabinet level meetings and so on. And the Reagan administration was a paragon of intellectual clarity and legal, and responsible behavior compared with these people. But the main lesson I took out of that was that, in general, people in government, certainly, I have to say, I'm sorry, but in Republican administrations, have much less idea what they're doing than you can possibly. uh,
I believe that you're not the first person to come out of government and make that point. Um, let's finally, Paul. Let's talk a little bit about the politics of this. There's often a sense among Democrats that because Trump won or Trump is somehow succeeding, that they're Democrats look for ways to co-opt some of these issues, and some of that seems politically sensible when it comes to certain issues. So, I think there are a lot of Democratic strategists who have helped the party rethink their views on immigration. Um, it's starting to happen on tariffs a little bit. Um, and you wrote about that recently. And I wonder what you think of some of those efforts, but also, what advice you have for Democrats in thinking about this issue. Is there anything to borrow from Trump when it comes to this issue? And how do you think about that?
First, I don't think that the tariffs are in any sense a winning political issue for Trump. In fact, people hate them, as far as we can tell from the polling. And by the way, the idea that Trump has a mandate, I mean, um, there's a new poll from G. Elliott Morris, who's of the formerly F-38, where he actually tried to do a rerun that says that if the election were held today, Trump would lose by 5 points. People are really, really pissed at what he's done so far. And
And the
the
people who are the most pissed, I don't know if I haven't looked at that poll, but from other polling, it seems the people he's losing are those tenuous voters who are not diehard Trump people, didn't like Biden's economy, and thought, oh, yeah, I remember the Trump economy being okay, maybe give him a shot because egg prices are high.
Yeah, that's right. A third of the public would vote for Trump if if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue or or um, or accept a $400 million bribe from Qatar. But that's not enough to win an election. It was those people, low engagement voters, people who don't follow the news a lot, who thought, I want prices down,
Yep.
and fast. And the tariffs, the there is no strong constituency for tariffs. It really is just not there. There are some unions who favor them, although I think they haven't really thought it through. And trying to respond to that. But if you say I am for U.S. manufacturing and I want a strategy that will an industrial policy that promotes important manufacturing that leads to increased investment in manufacturing. Um, well, we had that. We had a doubling of manufacturing construction under Biden, and
Yeah.
I don't think you need to give anything there in general. So this is now just completely taking off my economics hat, but what I've seen on politics, the idea that when somebody is pursuing uh, unpopular policies, that you must have your own grand vision that counters that. That I've been around for a while here. I know I look extremely youthful here, but um, but I remember the Bush attempt to privatize Social Security.
Yeah. Major turning point.
Democrats have to have their own alternative for security, and Nancy Pelosi just said no. We are just against this, and
It
won
was
big.
enough.
Yeah, and I think the thing to say is, look, we were doing pretty well. I know people were concerned, and we want to address the issues with the economy, but this guy has come in here with this policy that's going to raise your cost of living, that is going to cost you jobs, and we are not going to give him any cover. We're not going to give him any support. I think that's the strategy.
Yeah, just go with that. Were you disappointed that in what Gretchen Whitmer said about the tariffs recently?
Yeah, failure to read the I just I understand. I was disappointed that Sean Fain from the UAW endorsed the tariffs, and he really shouldn't, because uh, the U.S. auto industry it really isn't the U.S. auto industry; it's the North American auto industry. It's extremely integrated with Canada and Mexico. His members' jobs depend upon the continuing flow of trade, and I think this was a little bit of um, being stuck in the past, or maybe it's hard to explain to his members, but he really should be trying to say, look, uh, I want pro manufacturing policies, but not this.
So on that, isn't there always going to be a special pleading case where any domestic interest group would want their industry protected and would be, yeah, put tariffs on foreign imports that protect me. You're saying that's not actually the case with the auto tariffs, and that the UAW should not think of it that way.
Well, because the auto tariffs are being levied on not just on completed autos, but also on auto parts, actually, when you buy a car, even if it's made in the United States, a very large part of the value of that car is stuff that was made in Canada or Mexico, and some of it elsewhere it's not. And the steel is coming from, I think just uh, um, every estimate I've seen of what the Trump tariffs in his first term did was that they reduced employment in manufacturing because the increased costs outweighed whatever protective effect they supplied. And so now every industry is going to want a tariff to protect them. Tariffs for me, but not for me. They
Right.
want it, which is why FDR passed the Reciprocal Trade Agreements Act. It's why we have a system of negotiations. The real purpose of negotiations is mostly not to protect us from things that other countries will do. It's to protect ourselves against special interest policy. So it's actually a way of getting clean government um, that is dressed up wearing a costume that makes it look like it's a way of getting access to foreign markets, which it does, but is actually so that the clothespin manufacturer in the middle of nowhere doesn't get a special tariff.
Finally, Paul, I want to sort of end where we started, which is with the system that was built up, both with the legislation from 1937 and GATT and these decades of reducing tariffs. I mean, we talk about this in so many arenas, the post-depression, post-World War II international agreements that have been built up, and Trump just sort of, you know, disassembling them on multiple fronts. You know, on Liberation Day, you know, you wrote that he burned all of that down, at least with respect to this issue. Um, do you do you think there's any going back? I mean, how bad? I know it's very early days. A lot could happen. These tariffs could be declared, you know, illegal by the courts and just evaporate. Do you think there's any going back to the international economic world that came before Trump, or do you think this is now embedded in the Republican Party and the trust in America is at such a low, and it's just not fixable going forward?
It's really going to be hard. I mean, everybody, uh, foreign governments, US businesses, everybody knows, even if all of this stuff is reversed, they will know that it can happen. They now know that the United States is a country that treats a solemn international agreement as a suggestion. You know, it's like the way New Yorkers treat "Don't Walk" signs, um, and when we there's a lot to NAFTA has its detractors. I think it was on the whole a positive thing. But when we did sign that agreement with Canada and Mexico back in 1994, uh, the really important thing was not reducing the tariffs, which were already pretty low. It was certainty. It was giving everybody the assurance that the three countries would have access to each other's market in perpetuity, or so we thought, and businesses making plans on that basis. We can't make that kind of promise now. That's true about a lot of other things too. It's not just obviously not just trade policy. And when people ask
Yeah.
back to where we were, to the country and the international system we had 4 months ago, it's going to take more than just a change in management at the White House. It's going to take a lot. I mean, the only way I can see to ever get back to the good things about that world would be to have something like a not just a change of political leadership, but something like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where we go through and sort of have accountability for all the bad things that happen. And trade policy will be way down on the list of things that matter, but it's part of it. We really need to not just change policy, but we need to convince the world, including our people here, but also abroad, that no, actually, the America that you thought you knew last year is still who we are. because at the moment it doesn't look like it is.
Well, I hate to end on such a gloomy note, but my own view of this is that things are going to need to get much, much, much worse before anything like what you just described happens. Because I think some of these conversations and some of the people that are closely following this stuff are a lot of people are way behind, are not paying attention, don't think things are as bad as they are, and it's going to take some of the things that you've been warning about with the financial crisis and stagflation for us to get in that place. I don't know if you agree with that or not, and nobody obviously would wish for anything like that, but
Well,
um,
to really
it's
fix things need to get much worse. And the good news, I guess, sort of, is there's a pretty good chance that things will get much, much worse. Positive note.
perfect way to perfect way to end. Thanks for cheering us up. Um, thank you for doing this. Sorry about the technical difficulties. They were all my fault. You dealt with it like a pro, and I hope we can do it again sometime, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Okay, good to talk to you. And hi,
Good to
everybody.
talk to you.
Sorry about
Hi,
the.
everyone. Please check out Telos News if you aren't a subscriber already. Thanks for all of Paul's excellent viewers coming on here and all the great comments. And we'll see you all soon. Take care. Oh, Paul, you have to end it because I think, oh no, I got it. All right, bye.